The loudest crashes come from people who just lost control, not from the ones who walked away. When they lost their grip on you, the wheels came off. That's the real headline here. Not the noise, not the drama, not the emotional wreckage you're watching unfold around you. The real story, the one they're choking on, is simple and irreversible. They just realized you were never theirs to control. And once that truth hit, everything they built on top of that illusion started falling apart. Let me say this plainly, chosen ones, because some of you are already asking it in your minds. Why are they acting like this now? Why are they snapping at the wrong people? Why does it look like their life is imploding while I'm staying steady? The answer isn't complicated. It's brutal. Power lost quietly always explodes loudly somewhere else. Here's the idiomatic truth of this moment. When the leash snaps, the handler panics. And that panic never looks graceful. It looks sloppy. It looks emotional. It looks like people lashing out at co-workers, picking fights at home, torching relationships they still needed, and self-destructing while pretending they're totally fine. You didn't cause the crash. You were just the weight they were leaning on without realizing it. Chosen ones, understand this. People don't unravel when they lose you. They unravel when they lose leverage over you. Losing a person hurts. Losing control over a person threatens identity. That's when the nervous system goes into threat mode, judgment drops, impulse takes over, and suddenly the calm mask slips. That's why they're not confronting you directly. They can't. You're no longer accessible. So the chaos spills sideways onto anyone who feels safer to explode on. You might be wondering, was it something I said? Something I did? Did I trigger this by succeeding, growing, or changing? No. What triggered them wasn't your progress. It was the confirmation that you were never as dependent as they told themselves you were. The version of you they tried to manage, mold, or minimize. That person never existed. And realizing that feels like waking up to find the floor missing beneath your feet. Think of it like this. They built an entire structure assuming you were one of the load-bearing pillars. Not because you agreed to it, but because it benefited them. When you quietly stepped back, without arguing, without announcing it, the building didn't just weaken, it collapsed. Friendships, alliances, confidence, even their self-image came down together. And the most humiliating part for them, you didn't shove anything over, you simply stopped holding it up. That's why this phase looks unhinged. That's why you're seeing emotional freelancing in real time, snapping here, overreacting there, self-sabotage disguised as confidence, all while they insist they're unbothered. It's almost impressive how much energy goes into pretending nothing's wrong while everything's burning. Almost. Before we go any further, take a moment to support this message and the work behind it. If this spoke to you, if it gave you clarity, strength, or energy you didn't have before, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. Every single like tells us this content matters. Every subscription helps us keep showing up, digging deeper, and delivering powerful, life-changing insights without holding back. This channel exists to challenge, strengthen, and elevate you. Your support keeps the momentum alive and allows us to continue bringing focused, high-impact content straight to you. Stay connected, stay sharp, and let's keep building this together. Chosen ones, hear this clearly. You don't need to fight, prove, explain, or expose anything. Your existence already did the damage. The moment they realized they couldn't steer you, predict you, or scare you back into position, their entire system glitched. Control only works when the other person believes in it. You stopped believing. That's the end of the game. And before doubt creeps in, let me answer another question some of you are asking silently. Why does this feel heavy if I'm not doing anything wrong? Because watching someone else crash can be uncomfortable when you're wired for empathy. But don't confuse compassion with responsibility. You are not responsible for how people react to the loss of control. You are responsible for staying aligned with who you are. This is the power of being chosen, not in a mystical sense, but in a psychological one. It means you operate from internal authority. You don't move when pulled. You don't fold when pressured. You don't perform for approval. And that terrifies people who rely on leverage instead of respect. Your calm is not passivity, it's independence. Your silence is not weakness, it's certainty. So if you're watching someone spiral and thinking, why now? Now you know. They didn't discover your flaws, they discovered your autonomy. And once that bell is rung, it can't be unrung. This story doesn't start with confrontation, it starts with realization. The moment they saw who you really are and understood they never had control to begin with, everything else started crashing on its own. And before we go any deeper, pause for a second. Because if this message is already hitting close to home, you're not here by accident. If you've noticed people acting strange, projecting or crashing while you stay steady, this channel is for you. Like this video, subscribe, and stay connected, because what we break down here isn't surface-level talk. It's real insight into power, pressure, and perception. Drop a comment if you're feeling this shift happening around you right now. Your engagement keeps this content alive and growing. And now, let's move forward step by step. Because if you're truly one of the chosen ones, what comes next will feel uncomfortably familiar. Let's get into it. Number 1, they didn't break you. They watched you hold your shape under pressure. When the pressure hit, you didn't fold, you set the standard. Pressure doesn't invent character, it exposes it. And what they saw in you scared them. My dear chosen ones, this is where everything shifted, and they felt it before they understood it. What rattled them wasn't who you claimed to be, who you performed as, or how you showed up when conditions were comfortable. No, what shook them to the core was who you remained when life applied real weight. When the pressure didn't let up, when the support went silent, when excuses would have been understandable. That's when they realized they misjudged you completely. They were watching, chosen ones, quietly, closely. Not because they cared, but because they expected something to crack. They were waiting for frustration to rot you, waiting for betrayal to turn you reckless, waiting for loss to make you bitter, desperate, or small. That's how most people change under pressure. They start cutting corners, they start lying to themselves, they start trading integrity for survival. That's the pattern they know, that's the pattern they were counting on, but you didn't follow it. And that's where the problem started. You took losses without becoming cruel. You were overlooked without becoming petty. You were betrayed without becoming sloppy or loud. You didn't self-destruct just because things got uncomfortable. You didn't burn everything down to prove a point. You stayed grounded, not untouched, not perfect, but intact. And that kind of steadiness under stress is deeply unsettling to people who fall apart the moment life stops being fair. Here's the part they can't digest. Most people only look solid when nothing is testing them. The moment pressure shows up, the mask slips. Values bend, principles evaporate. But pressure didn't make you perform. It revealed you, and what it revealed didn't fit their narrative. They were fine watching you struggle, as long as struggle made you easier to control. They were fine with your hardship if it reduced your standards, blurred your boundaries, or made you seek approval. What they weren't prepared for was struggle sharpening your judgment, forcing you to say no, teaching you discernment, giving you a backbone where compliance used to be expected. That's when admiration quietly turned into resentment, because now they couldn't explain you away. They couldn't say you survived because of luck, favors, shortcuts, or someone carrying you. They had to face something far more uncomfortable your character held when circumstances tried to crush it. And character isn't cosmetic. You can't fake it. You can't borrow it. You can't manufacture it when things go south. Either it's there or it isn't. This is why energy shifted. This is why conversations changed. This is why tension crept into spaces that once felt easy. You didn't do anything aggressive. You didn't confront anyone. You didn't announce your growth. Your consistency did all the talking. You became living proof that integrity isn't a theory people debate. It's something you carry when nobody is clapping, protecting you, or offering reassurance. Chosen ones, let me answer a question some of you are asking right now. Why does this make them act strange? Because you broke an unspoken contract. The contract where struggle was supposed to weaken you. The contract where pressure was supposed to make you more manageable. Instead, it clarified you. And clarity is dangerous to people who rely on confusion, dependency, and leverage. You didn't come out arrogant. You didn't come out loud. You came out clear. Clear about who you are. Clear about what you'll tolerate. Clear about what you'll never do just to be accepted again. And once people realize they can't pressure you into abandoning yourself, they don't know where to place you anymore. They wanted a version of you that cracked so they could justify how they treated you. A version that validated their behavior. A version that made their control feel reasonable. Instead, they found someone who endured without losing themselves. And that discovery didn't inspire them, it exposed them. Think of pressure like a vice grip. Most materials either shatter or warp. You didn't do either. You held your shape. And now, every time they see you, they're reminded of what pressure did to them, the compromises they made, the values they dropped, the lines they crossed just to stay comfortable. Your presence becomes a mirror they didn't ask for and can't look away from. That's why they're uneasy. That's why they're reactive. That's why they're projecting and crashing elsewhere. You didn't attack them. You didn't even engage. You simply showed that pressure doesn't automatically corrupt someone and that truth makes excuses collapse. Chosen ones understand this deeply. Being chosen isn't about being special. It's about being unmovable when it counts. It's about holding your internal standard when external conditions are trying to rewrite it. And once people see that you have that, they realize something terrifying. You can't be controlled by pressure, fear, or circumstance. That's the moment they lost leverage, and that's why everything started unraveling. Number 2, they realized you were never tethered to them in the first place. You were never on their leash. You were already miles ahead. Nothing terrifies a controller more than realizing the person they tried to steer has been driving themselves the entire time. My dear chosen ones, this is where the panic really set in for them. Not because you challenged them, not because you announced your strength, not because you confronted, exposed, or defied them publicly. No. The moment they lost control was far quieter and far more devastating. They finally realized something they should have noticed long ago. You were never depending on them. You were outgrowing them the whole time, silently, steadily, and without permission. This is the realization that hits like a delayed slap. At first, everything felt normal to them. They still spoke with authority. They still assumed influence. They still believed their approval mattered. But beneath the surface, something wasn't lining up. Their words weren't steering you. Their reactions weren't shaping your decisions. Their presence wasn't anchoring your direction. And slowly, painfully, the truth surfaced. You weren't tethered. You never were. They assumed you needed them, needed their validation, needed their guidance, needed their protection or access. They built an entire sense of importance around the idea that you were waiting for them to open doors, greenlight decisions, or shield you from consequences. That belief gave them leverage. It made them feel indispensable. And losing that illusion didn't just bruise their ego, it shattered their sense of control. Because when they finally saw it clearly, their world tilted. You weren't looking over your shoulder for instructions. You weren't hesitating without their input. You weren't stuck, stalled, or unsure. You were moving, growing, adapting, building, quietly, deliberately, consistently, and the most unsettling part, your progress didn't make noise. Chosen ones understand this. Loud growth can be challenged. Quiet growth is terrifying. You weren't announcing milestones. You weren't seeking recognition. You weren't asking for permission. You didn't need applause or approval. You were laying bricks where they weren't even looking. And when they finally noticed the structure taking shape, it was already too late for them to intervene. They thought their presence was mandatory in your journey. They believed they held a piece of your trajectory, that your success, stability, or progress somehow ran through them. And discovering that it didn't, that you were already operating outside their influence, wasn't just humbling, it was terrifying. Because if you could thrive without them, then every manipulation they relied on suddenly became useless. All the subtle pressure, the guilt, the control masked as concern, the guidance that was really restriction, none of it worked. You had already built your foundation independently, and once they realized that, they started noticing the cracks everywhere. You were respected in spaces they couldn't influence. People listened to you without their endorsement. Opportunities aligned without their involvement. The version of you they thought they understood was already evolving beyond their reach. That truth doesn't just sting. It rattles anyone who needs to feel indispensable to feel powerful. You weren't waiting to be chosen. You were choosing yourself. You weren't hoping for opportunities to be handed down. You were creating your own. You weren't being shaped by their expectations. You were shaping yourself through experience, discipline, and clarity. And when that realization fully landed, they didn't respond with logic or grace. They panicked. Chosen ones, this is why they lashed out. This is why their reactions became erratic. This is why they projected frustration onto the wrong people, picked fights that made no sense, and sabotaged themselves in plain sight. They weren't reacting to something you did in the moment. They were reacting to the collapse of a belief they had built their confidence on, that they were controlling your story. And suddenly, they weren't. They were watching your life move forward without their input, without their permission, without their relevance, and nothing exposes insecurity faster than realizing you were never as important as you thought you were. That's when desperation shows. That's when chaos leaks out sideways. That's when they start spazzing out on anybody nearby because the real source of discomfort, you, was no longer reachable. Here's the part you need to hold on to. Chosen ones, you didn't outgrow them by force. You outgrew them by focus. You didn't need a confrontation. You didn't need to prove strength. You didn't need to make noise. Your independence spoke for you. Your consistency did the damage. Your silence confirmed what they feared. Silent power is more unsettling than loud rebellion. Loud defiance invites resistance. Quiet independence leaves no angle of attack. And that's why this realization hit them so hard. They didn't lose you in an argument. They lost you in evolution. You were already gone, building, growing, becoming, while they were still assuming control. And by the time they caught up to that truth, all they could do was watch your story pass them by. Number 3. Your calm wasn't weakness. It was deliberate control. You didn't freeze. You were running the numbers. Silence isn't empty when someone is thinking 3 moves ahead. Chosen ones, this is where they truly lost their footing. Not when you spoke, not when you stood your ground, but when you didn't react the way they expected. What threw them off balance wasn't your calm on the surface. It was the delayed realization that your calm wasn't passive. It was intentional. Every pause you took, every moment you appeared unbothered, every time you refused to bite wasn't fear. It was calculation. And that discovery hit them harder than any confrontation ever could. They were used to chaos working, used to noise shaking people loose, Used to pressure forcing mistakes. Their playbook was simple: provoke, intimidate, confuse, repeat. Most people crack somewhere in that cycle. They panic, they overshare, they overreact, they show their hand too early. That's what they were waiting for from you. That's what they assumed would happen once the heat was on. But it didn't. And that's when the unease set in. While they were escalating, raising their voice, throwing comments, testing emotional buttons, you were doing something entirely different. You were observing. You were listening for patterns, not words. You were watching timing, tone, and inconsistency. You weren't absorbing the chaos. You were mapping it. And people who thrive on disorder are deeply unsettled by someone who doesn't get swept up in it. Let's clear something up for the chosen ones who may be questioning themselves right now. You weren't slow. You weren't unsure. You weren't stuck. You were deliberate. You understood that reacting too quickly gives away leverage, that emotional responses create openings, that the loudest person in the room is rarely the one in control. You chose restraint not because you lacked power, but because you understood how to use it. Every jab they threw was meant to rattle you. Instead, it revealed them. Every attempt to manipulate exposed a pattern. Every emotional spike gave you data. You weren't frozen. You were focused. You weren't confused. You were clarifying. You weren't scared. You were deciding when and how to move. And when that realization finally landed for them, panic followed. Because here's the part they couldn't handle. They thought their energy was working. They believed their intimidation had an effect. They assumed their chaos was forcing you into a corner. But instead of bending you, it made them predictable. Their overreactions became their own undoing. The louder they got, the clearer their intentions became. And your calm, steady, unshaken, turned into a mirror reflecting just how unstable they were. Chosen ones, this is why you started noticing strange behavior around you. Side arguments, emotional outbursts directed at the wrong people, control slipping in places that had nothing to do with you. When someone realizes they can't provoke a reaction from you, the frustration doesn't disappear. It spills, and it usually spills onto whoever is closest and safest to explode on. They weren't melting down because of something you did. They were melting down because of something they couldn't do anymore, catch you off guard. Your composure was never about keeping the peace. It was about protecting your position. It was about timing, about security, about growth. You understood that there's a difference between urgency and importance, between noise and signal, and once they saw that you weren't reacting emotionally, they had to face a brutal truth. You were operating on a level they didn't anticipate. That's when the illusion collapsed. They realized you weren't playing the same game. While they were burning energy trying to control outcomes, you were conserving yours. While they were reacting to every moment, you were choosing which moments deserved a response. That gap between impulse and intention is where real power lives. And once they noticed you standing there comfortably, they knew something had gone wrong for them. Chosen ones, let this sink in. Reacting feels powerful to people who don't know how to think ahead. Calculating looks threatening to people who rely on emotional leverage. You didn't need to announce your awareness. You didn't need to expose their tactics publicly. Your restraint already told them everything they needed to know, that their usual tools weren't working. And that's why their meltdown was inevitable. They lost more than control. They lost surprise. They lost unpredictability. They lost the ability to rush you into mistakes. And once someone realizes they can't catch you slipping, can't rush you, can't provoke you into self-sabotage, the panic sets in fast. Because a chosen one who can think clearly under pressure isn't just hard to manipulate. They're impossible to ambush. And that realization sent them crashing, loudly, publicly, and away from you, while you stayed exactly where you were, already 3 steps ahead. Number 4. The story they built about you. stopped convincing anyone. The story they told about you finally fell apart. When a lie stops spreading, panic replaces confidence, and the storyteller loses control. My dear chosen ones, this is one of the most destabilizing moments for them, even if it looks subtle on the surface. The real collapse didn't happen when you spoke up, pushed back, or exposed anything directly. It happened quietly, almost invisibly, when their version of you stopped working on other people. That's the part they were never prepared for. Because their power was never about you, it was about perception. And once perception slipped out of their hands, everything else followed. For a long time, they survived by controlling the narrative. They told a story where you were flawed, unreliable, dependent, difficult, or lesser in some carefully chosen way. Sometimes it was subtle, sometimes it was exaggerated, sometimes it was wrapped in concern or fake objectivity. But the goal was always the same: to frame you in a way that kept them positioned above you or safely protected from being questioned. They assumed people would accept it without thinking. Most people usually do. But then something changed. People started pausing instead of nodding. They started noticing gaps, inconsistencies, contradictions. The story stopped flowing smoothly, and once that happens, chosen ones, the damage is irreversible. Because a narrative only works when it feels effortless. The moment it requires force, repetition, or emotional pressure, it starts to look exactly like what it is, manufactured. That's when their panic began. It wasn't just embarrassment. It wasn't just losing face. It was the sudden realization that they were losing authority, influence, the illusion that they could bend reality by shaping how others saw you. They had relied on the idea that perception could be managed indefinitely, that truth could be delayed or buried. What they didn't account for is that truth doesn't need volume, it needs consistency, and you gave it that without saying a word. Chosen ones, this is where your quiet power did the most damage. You didn't campaign for sympathy. You didn't argue your case. You didn't run around correcting rumors or defending yourself. You just existed the same way everywhere, calm, grounded, capable, the same tone, the same standards, the same integrity. And over time, that consistency started to clash violently with the version of you they were selling. People began to notice that the evidence didn't line up. The claims didn't match your behavior. The warnings didn't match your results. And suddenly, the storyteller started looking unstable, irrational, over-invested. That's the moment they realized they were losing more than a narrative. They were losing credibility. That realization is brutal. Because once people stop believing the story, they start questioning the storyteller. And that's when everything unravels. You may have noticed it. The over-explaining, the emotional reactions, the defensiveness that comes out of nowhere. They begin lashing out, not at you, but at anyone close enough to reflect their failure back to them. Friends, colleagues, bystanders, anyone becomes a target because the pressure is internal now, not external. Chosen ones, let me answer the question forming in your mind. Why are they spiraling if I didn't do anything? Because their control depended on silence and compliance. And while you stayed silent, you didn't comply. Your consistency did what confrontation never could. It made their manipulation visible. Their words started losing precision. Their tone became sharper. Their reactions more erratic. Authority evaporated because authority can't survive once people sense insecurity underneath it. They couldn't contain the collapse because the foundation itself, the story, was breaking apart in real time, right in front of witnesses. And the most terrifying part for them? You didn't give them anything to fight. No aggression, no public defense, no emotional outburst, nothing they could frame as proof. You denied them the chaos they needed to stay in control. All you did was remain authentic, steady, and uncompromising. That's a nightmare scenario for someone who manipulates through distortion. Chosen ones understand this. When people realize the version of you they were told doesn't match reality, they don't just stop believing the lie, they reassess everything connected to it. And that's why their confidence dissolved, their composure cracked, their influence shrank, because their version of you no longer mattered to anyone who could see clearly. You didn't dismantle their narrative with force, you outlived it, and that's why they're scrambling now, reacting, crashing, watching control slip through their fingers while you remain untouched. Your integrity didn't just protect you, it quietly erased everything they built against you, and there is no recovery from that. Number 5, your reputation grew in spaces they couldn't influence. They didn't start unraveling because you suddenly became powerful in front of them. They started unraveling because they realized something far more dangerous. You were already respected in rooms they can't even enter. That's when the panic set in. That's when the sideways explosions began. Because influence you can't see, touch, or control is the kind that dismantles fragile egos at the core. My dear chosen ones, understand this clearly. They always assumed proximity meant authority. They believed that because they were near you, involved with you, or familiar with your past, they had a say in how the world would perceive you. They thought they were the gatekeepers of your reputation, the narrators of your story, the ones who could frame you, limit you, or quietly undermine you before anyone important ever noticed your value. That illusion kept them comfortable for a long time, until it shattered. The moment everything shifted wasn't when you spoke up. It wasn't when you defended yourself. It wasn't when you demanded recognition. It was when they discovered that people who actually matter were already watching you, and they weren't listening to them. People whose opinions carry weight. People who can't be pressured, manipulated, or steered by gossip. People who see patterns, consistency, and character without needing a storyline fed to them. That realization hits like a shockwave, because now the old rules stop working. Suddenly, their whispers don't travel, their warnings don't land, their subtle digs don't stick. Instead of shaping perception, they're exposed as background noise, and nothing destabilizes a control-driven person faster than realizing they've been talking loudly in rooms that no longer matter. Chosen ones, you didn't earn that respect by campaigning for it. You earned it the way real credibility is always earned, quietly, repeatedly, and without spectacle. While they were busy managing appearances, you were building substance. While they were focused on optics, you were focused on consistency. And in rooms they were never invited into, rooms built on standards, discernment, and results, you were being recognized for exactly who you are. This is where their reaction turns ugly, because it's not just jealousy they feel, it's humiliation, the kind that crawls under the skin, the kind that makes people snap at co-workers, pick fights at home, and sabotage themselves while insisting they're fine. They're watching proof pile up that their role in your life was never as central as they imagined, that your value doesn't require their endorsement, that your reputation exists independently of their approval. And that realization dismantles the identity of anyone who survives by feeling indispensable. They spent years assuming your worth could be managed through access, that if they stayed close enough, they could define you, limit you, delay you. They built entire strategies around poking at insecurities they thought you had, around shrinking your reach before it ever expanded. What they didn't account for was this. True influence doesn't announce itself, and it doesn't ask permission. So when they started noticing your name being spoken with respect in circles they couldn't penetrate, the panic became unavoidable. They couldn't intercept it, they couldn't poison it, they couldn't rewrite it, and worse, they had to watch it happen in real time. That's when the behavior gets theatrical, overreactions, petty conflicts, sudden mood swings, desperate attempts to reassert relevance where none exists anymore. Chosen ones, you might be wondering why they're suddenly so reactive, why they seem obsessed, why they keep trying to insert themselves back into narratives they no longer control. It's because they're facing the limits of their power, and limits terrify people who thought they were untouchable. Here's the truth they can't accept. Respect isn't handed out through proximity, it's not granted by association, and it can't be forced through manipulation. Respect is earned through alignment between who you say you are and who you consistently prove yourself to be. That's why no amount of sabotage worked. That's why their influence evaporated the moment it mattered. You never needed them to open doors. You never needed them to validate your moves. You never needed them to defend your name. And watching you thrive without their involvement exposes the emptiness of their control. They're not just spazzing out. They're confronting the uncomfortable reality that their reach ends where your credibility begins. That's why they crashed so hard. Because your presence in those unseen rooms isn't just evidence of your worth. It's a mirror reflecting their irrelevance. And that reflection is something they can't escape, no matter how loud they get. Number 6. You recovered without explanations, apologies, or permission. You closed the wound without waiting for them to admit it. Nothing terrifies a controlling mind more than realizing you healed without needing their permission. My dear chosen ones, this realization hit them like a delayed earthquake. Not loud at first, not dramatic. Just a deep, destabilizing shift that cracked everything underneath. What shook them wasn't that you moved on. People move on every day. What shook them was how you did it. Quietly, cleanly, on your own timeline, without asking for explanations, apologies, or approval. That was never supposed to happen. They were counting on something very specific. They assumed the damage they caused would tether you to them emotionally, that the confusion, the manipulation, the betrayals, the mixed signals would leave you stuck replaying conversations, waiting for clarity, hoping for closure. They believed you would need their words to make sense of what happened. They believed your healing required their acknowledgement. And because they believed that, they believed they still had a place in your inner world. Then they realized something terrifying. You healed anyway. No dramatic announcements, no public breakdowns, no revenge arc, no long explanations. You didn't chase resolution. You didn't beg for understanding. You didn't demand accountability from people who were never capable of giving it. You simply stopped bleeding where they expected you to keep hurting. And the moment they noticed that shift, panic set in. Because chosen ones understand this clearly. When someone builds relevance through guilt, fear, or emotional dependency, your independence feels like erasure. They wanted to see you wounded because your pain justified their importance. They wanted you stuck because your confusion kept them central. They wanted you dependent because dependence is leverage. And when they realized none of that worked, their entire sense of control collapsed. Your healing stripped them of narrative power. They could no longer frame themselves as necessary to your recovery. They could no longer paint you as broken without them. They could no longer use your pain as proof of their significance. Every calm decision you made, every boundary you held, every moment you didn't react, became evidence that their role in your life was never as important as they thought. Some of you are wondering right now, why does this make them spiral instead of mature? Because maturity requires accountability, and accountability requires admitting they weren't as powerful as they believed. It's easier to unravel than to reflect. It's easier to lash out than to accept that someone you tried to control grew beyond you without looking back. They expected anger from you, or bitterness, or a desire for revenge. They expected emotional mess. That's how most people process pain. But you didn't weaponize your hurt. You didn't turn resentment into your identity. You didn't need to win by destroying them. You chose something far more destabilizing. You chose peace without permission. That choice is terrifying to anyone who relies on emotional hooks. Because if you don't need closure, they lose their bargaining chip. If you don't need apologies, they lose their power. If you don't need validation, they lose relevance. And when all of that disappears at once, the only thing left is exposure. Chosen ones, let this sink in. You didn't just survive what they put you through. You evolved past the need to make sense of it. You let time, clarity, and self-trust do the work they assumed only they could control. And in doing that, you stepped out of a psychological cage they didn't even realize they built. That's why their reactions became chaotic. That's why their behavior started looking irrational and desperate. That's why they began projecting, snapping at others, and unraveling in spaces that had nothing to do with you. They weren't reacting to your words. You didn't give them any. They were reacting to the realization that you are whole without them. Your healing didn't ask for permission. It didn't require acknowledgement. It didn't need applause. You didn't announce it because you didn't need witnesses. You reclaimed yourself in silence, and that silence spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. And here's the part they can't undo. Once someone heals without you, you can never insert yourself back into their story. You can't rewrite their narrative. You can't reopen wounds that no longer exist. You can't matter in a chapter that's already closed. Witnessing someone thrive despite them, untethered, unshaken, and emotionally unreachable, is the ultimate disruption. It exposes their dependency, it highlights their insecurity, and it reveals how fragile their influence really was. Chosen ones, your quiet strength didn't just free you, it dismantled them. And that's why they're crashing hard, because nothing terrifies a control-based mindset more than someone who no longer needs them to survive. Number 7. They figured out you keep score, you just don't rush the outcome. You keep the receipts, not the drama. The most dangerous person in the room is the one who remembers everything and still chooses silence. My dear chosen ones, this is the realization that truly broke their composure. Not your strength, not your growth, not even your detachment. What shook them at a deeper level was understanding that you remember everything, every slight, every betrayal, every manipulation, and yet you refused to turn those memories into weapons. That restraint unsettled them more than any confrontation ever could. They were counting on impulse. They expected explosions. They expected emotional reactions they could point to, twist, or use against you. They thought you would lash out the moment the pressure hit, expose yourself in the heat of emotion, or burn bridges just to feel momentary relief. That's how they operate. That's the behavior they understand. But you didn't give them that. Instead, you became quiet in a way that wasn't passive. It was precise. You carried every interaction like a ledger only you could read, every lie noted, every hidden intention registered, every pattern logged. And the terrifying part for them wasn't that you knew, it was that you didn't rush to prove it. You didn't argue facts. You didn't revisit old wounds. You didn't demand accountability in the moment. You let time do what time always does, expose repetition. Chosen ones, let's answer a question that's probably been circling in your mind. Why does my silence make them more nervous than my anger ever did? Because anger burns quickly and gives relief. Memory held calmly creates pressure with no release. It means nothing slipped past you. It means the past still exists, even if you don't bring it up. And that uncertainty eats at people who rely on others forgetting. They began to feel it. You could see it in how their old tactics stopped working. Comments that once rattled you now fell flat. Threats that once influenced your behavior were suddenly ignored. Manipulations that depended on your emotional response lost traction. And slowly, the realization crept in. You weren't unaware. You were simply patient. That's when paranoia set in, because now every interaction with you felt weighted. Every word they spoke carried risk. Every move they made was measured against what you might already know. They could sense it, the quiet certainty in your posture, the lack of urgency in your responses, the calm that comes from someone who understands the full context. And that knowledge became a weapon without you ever lifting it. You didn't accuse, you didn't threaten, you didn't even remind them. Your awareness did the work on its own. Chosen ones, understand this. Remembering without reacting immediately is not weakness. It's discipline, it's strategy. It's knowing that the right moment carries more power than the loudest response. You chose control over chaos, precision over pettiness, long-term clarity over short-term release. And that choice exposed how reckless they really are. They couldn't understand why you weren't playing the same games, why you weren't engaging in back and forths, why you weren't cashing in those memories for emotional payoff. And that confusion destabilized them. People who depend on emotional hooks don't know what to do when someone stops biting, so they began to unravel elsewhere. They overcompensated. They snapped at people who had nothing to do with you. They became erratic, defensive, impulsive, anything to relieve the pressure of knowing they were seen. You didn't even need to move. Your restraint became a mirror reflecting their instability. Here's the truth they couldn't swallow. You weren't holding grudges. You were holding awareness. You weren't plotting revenge. You were preserving clarity. And clarity is terrifying to those who rely on distortion. They realized that nothing they did went unnoticed, and that realization alone stripped them of comfort. Chosen ones, this is where your power becomes undeniable. You understand that timing matters, that information is more valuable when it's held than when it's thrown. That silence, when backed by memory, carries weight that noise never could. You didn't forget. You simply chose not to reveal everything all at once. And that choice made them reckless, desperate, and exposed. The more they sensed the depth of what you remembered, the more chaotic they became, because they knew they couldn't rewrite the past with you. They couldn't gaslight you. They couldn't erase the record. And worst of all for them, they couldn't predict when or if those memories would ever surface. They weren't just losing composure, they were confronting a hard truth. The person they tried to manipulate was always aware, always observant, and always ahead of the game. Chosen ones, let this anchor you. Your memory is not a burden, it's a compass, and your restraint isn't silence, it's leverage they can never take back. Number 8. You let consequences do the damage instead of retaliation. You didn't chase payback, you let the bill come due. The most terrifying thing for someone who lives by manipulation is realizing no one is coming for them, because consequences already are. My dear chosen ones, this is where their panic turned into full collapse. Not because you confronted them, not because you exposed them, not because you fought back, but because you did something far more destabilizing to people who rely on control. You stepped aside and let reality handle it. What truly unnerved them wasn't rage from you, it wasn't retaliation, it wasn't even distance. It was the cold, unmistakable realization that you didn't need to do anything at all for things to start unraveling in their lives. That's the moment they lost their footing. Because their entire mindset was built on one assumption: if they hurt you, you'd react. If they lied, you'd explode. If they undermined you, you'd counterattack. That reaction was supposed to be their proof of relevance. And then it didn't come. Chosen ones understand this clearly. People who rely on emotional leverage believe reactions are power. They believe noise equals influence. They believe intimidation only works if someone responds. When you didn't take the bait, when you didn't shout, threaten, or seek revenge, You removed the feedback loop they depended on, and without that loop, their actions started turning inward. Every lie they told kept circulating. Every manipulation they set in motion began colliding with other lies. Every attempt to undermine you started exposing contradictions they could no longer manage. Not because you orchestrated it, but because deception collapses under its own weight when no one rushes in to distract from it. They expected chaos. They expected attacks. They expected you to come swinging so they could point and say, "See, this is who they really are." Instead, they were met with something far worse: inevitability, quiet, calm, the slow, unavoidable return of their own behavior. That realization is jarring to anyone who's used to pulling strings, because suddenly nothing they do produces the outcome they expect. Here's the question some of you are asking right now. Why does that make them spiral so hard? Because it exposes a truth they can't tolerate. Their power only existed if someone responded to it. Without your emotional investment, their tactics became self-defeating. And self-defeat is unbearable for people who see themselves as the driver of outcomes. They assumed you'd respond with fury because that's what most people do. They assumed emotional reaction was proof that you were affected, vulnerable, still in reach. But you understood something they never did. Real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't rush. It doesn't need to be seen. It allows time, truth, and circumstance to do the work quietly. So while they were overreacting, scrambling, and trying to regain control, you were observing. Not plotting, not stewing, observing. Letting their own momentum carry them exactly where it was always headed. You weren't trapped in their chaos. You stepped outside of it, and chaos without an audience turns destructive very fast. That's when the meltdown began. They started lashing out at the wrong people, blaming allies, picking unnecessary fights, making reckless decisions that didn't even serve their interests. Why? Because they were facing consequences they assumed you would have to deliver personally. They never planned for a scenario where you stayed composed while their own actions exposed them. Chosen ones, this is a level of mastery most people never reach. Because revenge feels satisfying in the short term, it feels like control. But revenge requires effort, planning, emotional investment, and energy. You didn't waste any of that, you conserved it. You understood that stepping out of the cycle was more powerful than striking back within it. And that's what made it unbearable for them. They couldn't provoke you. They couldn't shame you. They couldn't intimidate you into reacting. Every attempt backfired, shining a brighter light on their instability, irrationality, and lack of foresight. The harder they tried to regain control, the more exposed they became. And you didn't have to lift a finger to make it happen. This is the quiet dominance of chosen ones, not because you're passive, but because you're precise. You know when action is necessary and when restraint is the most disruptive move available. You let their own behavior dismantle the illusions they worked so hard to maintain. You let reality audit them. Watching someone crash while you remain steady is deeply unsettling to people who thought they were untouchable. It proves that control doesn't always come from aggression. Sometimes it comes from refusing to interfere with the consequences someone has already earned. And that's the truth they can't escape now. They didn't lose because you attacked them. They lost because you didn't need to. Number 9. What was meant to damage? You actually sharpened you. You didn't come out damaged. You came out sharpened. Fire doesn't ask permission to refine steel. It just does the work. And that's what you became. My dear chosen ones, this is the realization that hit them the hardest and sent them into full collapse. Not your confidence, not your progress, not even your resilience on the surface. What shook them to the core was the undeniable truth that you weren't broken by what you went through. You were refined by it. Every hardship they assumed would weaken you did the opposite. Every betrayal they thought would leave you bitter instead gave you clarity. Every moment they expected you to fall apart quietly turned you into someone sharper, calmer, and far more difficult to manipulate. They were betting on damage. That was their miscalculation. They thought pressure would fracture you. They thought disappointment would hollow you out. They thought pain would make you reactive, emotional, and predictable. That's how it works for most people. Most people carry wounds they never examine, then bleed on anyone nearby. Most people let hardship turn them rigid or reckless. They expected you to follow that script. You didn't. Instead of cracks, they found edges. Instead of weakness, they found precision. Instead of chaos, they found composure. You didn't just endure what happened to you. You processed it. You extracted meaning from it. You adjusted. You evolved. And that's terrifying to people who rely on leverage, because leverage only works on someone who's still internally unstable. Chosen ones, let's be honest about something they'll never admit. You can't intimidate someone whose foundation has already survived fire. Fear doesn't land the same when you've already faced loss. Guilt doesn't stick when you've already examined your conscience. Manipulation doesn't work when you understand patterns instead of reacting emotionally. They assumed your struggles would make you smaller, more compliant, easier to predict. Instead, struggle trained you. It taught you where your limits actually are and where they aren't. Every setback became data. Every betrayal became discernment. Every disappointment stripped away illusions you no longer needed. You didn't come out hardened in the sense of closed off. You came out clear. Clear about people, clear about intentions, clear about what matters and what doesn't. And clarity is dangerous to those who thrive in confusion. That's why their meltdown was so intense. Because they realized something too late. Their attempts to break you didn't fail. They backfired. Every scheme they ran against you strengthened the very qualities that made you untouchable. Every manipulation forced you to develop stronger boundaries. Every effort to undermine you sharpened your instincts. Without intending to, they participated in your refinement while exposing their own desperation. Think about how unsettling that is from their position. They expected control. They got consequence. They expected damage. They got growth. They expected you to need validation, closure, or revenge. Instead, they watched you rise without noise, without chaos, without asking for permission or acknowledgement. You didn't need them to repair what they tried to break, because nothing essential was ever taken from you. Chosen ones, this is where many of you quietly wonder, why does my calm make them so angry? Why does my lack of reaction make them spiral? Because your refinement removes their last excuse. They can't say you're bitter. They can't say you're unstable. They can't say you're broken or stuck. You're living proof that hardship doesn't automatically destroy someone, and that truth dismantles their worldview. What they're facing now isn't just someone who survived. They're facing someone who understands themselves. Someone who doesn't need to shout to be solid. Someone who doesn't need revenge to feel balanced. Someone whose strength doesn't require witnesses. That kind of autonomy is unpredictable to people who rely on pressure and intimidation, because no amount of force can create a crack that isn't there. They keep pushing, not because they think it will work, but because they don't know what else to do. Their tools don't function on refined material. The old tactics slide off. The emotional hooks don't sink in. And the harder they try, the more exposed they become. You weren't shaped by comfort. You were shaped by contrast. And that's why you move differently now. You see further. You react less. You choose carefully. You're not fragile because you've already been tested. And that realization that you're no longer breakable in the ways they need you to be is what left them panicked, scrambling, and fully exposed. They weren't dealing with someone damaged. They were dealing with someone forged. And that's a reality they never prepared for. And now, as everything comes together, understand this clearly. What you're witnessing isn't random chaos. It's the natural reaction to someone who can no longer be controlled, pressured, or reduced. If this breakdown helped you see your situation with sharper clarity, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay connected. Drop 77 in the comments if this message spoke directly to where you are right now, and share this with someone who needs perspective and strength today. Your support keeps this channel focused on delivering direct, powerful insight without dilution. Stay grounded, stay aware, and keep moving forward.